It means the Ministry's interfering at Hogwarts.
You're not going mad. You're just as sane as I am.
I must not tell lies.
You seem to be laboring under the delusion that I'm going to, what was the phrase? Come quietly.
Hey everyone, welcome to Hogwarts, a podcast. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Hogwarts, a podcast. We are doing Chapter 3, The Advanced Guard. We have Molly with us today.
Hello!
And before we get into the chapter, we have a couple of shout-outs. I wanted to shout out Vimes, who you can find on Twitter at The Ruin, R-U-A-N. I'm probably butchering that pronunciation. At The Ruin L, capital L, who's actually catching up on our podcast. He's going through all of the episodes, and he's listening from South Africa. So cheers to you for listening for all of our episodes from South Africa. That's really cool. Just the idea that we're actually being listened to on the continent of Africa is kind of a cool idea. Also, we've recently dropped our 100th episode, so that's crazy to think about. We didn't even really realize it until we went back afterwards, and we're like, I wonder how many episodes we've actually done. And then we posted it on our Twitter, and a bunch of people have actually, commented and congratulated us, like Maria T, who's a frequent contributor. Podcast called the Killin' Missin' Hidden podcast. Cool. Thank you for congratulating us on that. And Chat Tsunami, ChatSunami, who's been pretty active on our Twitter lately, also gave us a shout out for that. So thank all of you for that. I can't believe we're at the 100th episode. And obviously we just started Order of the Phoenix. I think, Molly, you made the comment that it seems to be going really fast.
It does. It feels like it's going fast.
Yeah, I guess it's the doing these, one episode every week, and we just seemingly pound through it. But, we've been doing this for a long time already now.
A few years.
Yeah, which is kind of crazy. And we have a few years left to go. So,
we do.
This book will almost take a full year just to get through this book. So, we'll see. So, this chapter, The Advanced Guard, is, I think, a pretty cool chapter. I've liked the first couple of chapters in this book, and we'll get to all of your thoughts on Order of the Phoenix in a second. But this chapter kind of introduces us to quite a few different characters. Even, I guess you can call it a reintroduction in a way. Mm-hmm. But we start the chapter with stunningly some teenage angst. Then we meet all of these new characters, and then we're off on a journey. That's essentially the chapter in a nutshell. There's not a whole lot to it dynamically, really. It's just very point to point. But I know, obviously, Molly, you have a soft spot in your heart for the creatures of the world.
Oh, I do.
And Harry is not very nice to Hedwig at the beginning of this chapter. He's all in his emotions. And, in defense of Harry here, he mentions it's been 4 days since the whole epic meltdown of events post Dudley being attacked by a Dementor. So that's a long time to kind of be in the dark on all of this. Mm-hmm. You have a bunch of letters flying at you, just being like, hey, stay put. This is crazy. I know you've been expelled from Hogwarts. I know they're coming to take your wand. Just chill. Just sit and chill. We're figuring this out. And then they just leave him.
Yep.
And they're like, silent. Mm-hmm. Silent. Silent. And he's stuck in this room because obviously the Dursleys don't want him walking around the house. It's a lot. And he takes a little bit out on Hedwig. But what are your thoughts on Harry's, I guess, more emo nature at the beginning of this book in the first couple chapters?
Yeah, so first of all, Order of the Phoenix, awesome book. Starts with a bang, gets you right into it. Mm-hmm. So enjoy that. But yeah, Harry definitely has, a little bit of emo going on in him.
Would you consider the first chapter one of the more exciting chapters.
Yeah, I would. Especially for like the first beginning of it. It's just right off the start, like fun thing, or not fun things, but
It gets, like you said, it gets you into the action, and
Right.
it's gets you off and running. Where some of the other earlier chapters that we've gone through have just been these slow plot filled,
yeah,
like back at the Dursleys,
right.
Just
Harry's
hang out.
a special boy
right?
for the
Exactly.
10,000,000th time.
He's a very special boy.
Very special.
I don't know what teenage Molly was like,
Oh man.
but do you kind of identify with some of this angst that Harry's feeling? Do you kind of get where he's coming from? Or is this just like, Harry, get it together, man? Like, where are you at?
So, I mean, I wouldn't say I was like an angsty teenager. Like, I know I'm sure I had my few years where, you know, the hormones hit you hard.
Yeah.
And you're just like, bah! And,
How was that? That was
you're
was
welcome for that noise. Yeah. You know, it's like where you got mad at your mom for stupid things in the grocery store. I think we all have like our angsty years, but the biggest thing with Harry in these first couple chapters is he just went through a pretty traumatic experience. And probably not the best thing for him right now is isolation.
Yeah.
Or the Dursleys.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's good or healthy for anyone in any mind state to be trapped in a house with Vernon.
Yeah.
But so if you just witnessed a traumatic event on any level, hopefully no one's, you know, witnessed a traumatic event to the level that Harry has in the last chapter, where you're like physically abused, you watch a friend die in front of you, you witness the person, the individual that's responsible for your parents' death come right back. And then to your point, you're in isolation, and it's, how can I relate this to everybody? But like, you ever have that feeling when you're in your room at night, everything's off. You turn off the TV, you put your phone away finally, and it's just you in the blackness of your room, about ready to fall asleep. And before you fall asleep, it's just you and your brain. And like, if anybody's experienced this, like anxiety or whatever, but your brain seems to think of like, it seems to think of every like dumb thing you've ever done and just torture you with it. Like, oh, I made that one person feel awkward when I was in 5th grade. You know?
100% been there.
And you just relive these events, however dumb they are, like that one, or however traumatic they actually were, like this. And he's got 4 days of nothing but being in a room where he can't use magic. He has no TV. He has no PlayStation or Xbox or computer to distract him from his thoughts.
He can't mentally check out.
He can't.
No.
He's like, he's in a physical prison because, as you know, he mentions, they locked the door and they're feeding him through a doggy door. Like, he's in a literal prison, but he's also in this like mental prison where he's not getting any stimulation otherwise. And his friends, who he wants to have that outlet with, aren't giving him that retreat. I get that they can't. They keep saying vague things like, "We'll get there. We'll tell you eventually." Okay, if you're his friends, you got to do a little bit better. You got to give him something to take his mind off of whatever. Mm-hmm. Even if you're not telling him about Voldy's whereabouts, you can still be like, hey, you know, this was happening, you know, with my family, or Ron has got to come up with something better. Or Ron's got to be like, make something up about Charlie.
Right.
Or Bill. If they're doing something that's important and you can't divulge where they're at, make something up. Like, figure it out. I'm not saying lie to the kid, but lie to the kid. Like, give him something to go on. And if you're Dumbledore, I think this is a flaw because at the end of book 4, you're like saying how to deal with a traumatic experience. You have to deal with it and you have to be present in it to accept that it happened so you can move forward. Great advice. Here, he just kind of lets him go.
Yeah.
And now he's another thing that happens when you're alone with just you and your brain. Logic starts to fade and you just start on this slippery slope of making stuff up yourself.
Coming up with thoughts.
And your brain can create scenarios that are super messed up.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's where Harry's at here in this chapter. And I find it super relatable. And it helps coming right off of book 4. So you get the full story. And, we've talked about it in the past, how these books had a gap between. So people just picked up book 5 and were like, why is this kid so, angsty?
Yeah, for sure.
I get it.
Yeah.
So it's this emotion has never, ever bothered me.
Yeah. The first time I read it, I was like, oh my God. I was on the side of, he's being too angsty. And then the more times I reread the book, I've gone through the Harry Potter books a lot. My opinions have changed. I feel like something always changes, depending upon, or something always changes every time I reread the books for me. So
I think that's the best way to read the books.
Yeah.
Is kind of put yourself in a new frame or a new mindset.
Oh, definitely.
And I think that's what I've done. One of the things I like about this read through the podcast is I purposefully try to put myself in other characters' shoes and be like, what is this scenario like?
Ooh, that's cool.
For somebody else in the scene? Because I've always read it through Harry's perspective, because that's all I've ever done. So I'm like, oh, how would Hermione be dealing with this? Or how would Molly Weasley be dealing with it? Or how would Fudge be dealing with this? Or what is this like for Peter Pettigrew?
That's a pretty cool perspective.
I like doing it, because then you start thinking of, just other characters' motivations. Mm-hmm. And maybe they make a little bit more sense than just the irrational 14-year-old boy like, this is so unfair. Okay, well, time out.
Right.
These are adults with their own reasons for things. But yeah, so that's a lot.
Yeah. Already, we're off on some good tangents.
Yeah. Ultimately, we get to the point. First of all, before we get by the Hedwig thing, I like how he writes out these notes to Sirius, Hermione, and Ron, and then tells Hedwig to peck them until they give them a long enough response. That's just mean on a couple of fronts.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. I think the logical thing is it's set in anger. He's just so angry right now, and he's so in his own head, like you were talking about, and he just can't get outside of it. And
if I am them, I am not happy about that.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
I know this is another thing we kind of get numb to, but Hedwig is a snowy owl.
Yes.
That is not a small bird. We're not talking about Pig, like Ron's little tiny owl.
Right.
Hedwig is a decently sized owl.
That's gonna hurt.
It's gonna hurt.
Yeah.
That's gonna hurt a lot. I'm sure she's being kind and nipping them, but still, that's that owl can do a lot of damage if it wanted to.
For sure. Well, even their claws. In real life, people wear leather gloves.
Yeah, those talons are legit.
Yeah. They're dangerous.
And she's just out on a hunt. She just brought back a frog or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway. Sorry, random tangent.
Would it really be a Dan and Molly episode without random tangents?
Random tangents? Absolutely not. And we might get on some more, because there's some interesting stuff coming up. We get the appearance of what Harry thinks are burglars downstairs. And we get the appearance of what he says is roughly 8 or 9 people at the bottom of the landing. And I'm just going to run through them now. We get Moody, Lupin, Nymphadora Tonks, Kingsley Shacklebolt, Alpheus Dodge. I'm going to pronounce that Dodge. D-O-G-E. Dedalius Diggle, who, if you remember from way, way, way back when, he even says it in here. It's like, oh, I met you before.
I love
like,
that
way
reference.
back when. You get Emmeline Vance, Sturgis Podmore, and Hestia Jones is the group that comes to pick Harry up from Privet Drive. And there's a lot going on here. Obviously, there's a lot of volunteers to come go get Harry. And most of them seem, I don't know what the word is, fascinated by, intrigued by. They all just kind of look at him and stare at him pointedly.
Yeah, well, I think with that, we're so used to Harry at this point that it's just Harry.
Mm-hmm.
I think we forget that, like, there's other people that have not met Harry and not have met the very special boy that he is and are, like, enamored with him. So it's kind of a reintroduction to, like, oh, this is Harry Potter and, a way.
Well, I think it's like, you get the Harry Potter vibe.
Mm-hmm.
He's famous. So you get him from literally being a baby and what he did. They like took part or lived through that first Wizarding War, so they know what that was like, and he's the one that effectively ended it. So there's that. But then you get the sense of, what do you think Dumbledore told them exactly? Do you think he told them, oh, by the way, Harry Potter just fought Voldy and survived, got here, like he told them the whole event of the night, I would assume.
He may have. You never know with Dumbledore.
That's
He's
true.
such a wild card.
That's true. But can you imagine if you're like Emmeline Vance and you're like, why should I go pick up this kid on a random day? And Dumbledore tells you, presumably, tells you that story. What must be going through your mind? Like some 14-year-old kid just beat Voldy in a duel, got back with a body. By the way, survived and won the Triwizard. Like, what is going on?
Yeah.
Like, I would be curious. I'd be like, no, I want to go meet this kid. Like, this kid must be legit.
Right.
But to your point, yeah, I don't know what Dumbledore probably told them.
Right.
If it was just like, no, he's important, go pick him up.
Yeah. I would assume he probably dropped some information because if they are, quote, part of the order, they're probably going to have to know some details because they've been discussing it.
You'd think. You'd think like if he'd have to at least tell them like, hey, Voldy's back. Like he said at the end of Goblet of Fire. Hey, we're getting the band back together. We're getting this group back together here.
Yeah.
I would assume there need to be a reason for that.
Yeah.
Not just, hey, there's some rogue Death Eaters, like whatever.
Yeah.
No. We need like a whole squad. We need to get the whole squad.
Dan, when you said we're getting the band back together, for some reason my brain totally just went to the Blues Brothers.
All right. If you couldn't tell, that reference, we're from Chicago. Very heavy Chicago reference, that one.
Yes.
Go watch that movie if you haven't.
Yes.
Oh, driving in like an old car just to pick them all up.
Yep.
I can see Dumbledore totally doing that.
Yeah.
He's like, we got to be stealthy about this.
Right? Moody, he's got his hat, his sunglasses on, and it's dark.
Oh, Moody is such a vibe here. So we kind of get like a reintroduction of sorts. Because we had a whole book of Moody, except we had none of the actual Alistair Moody in it.
Yes.
So this is like our first introduction to the character?
The first introduction to the real Moody.
Yeah,
Well,
to the conscious Moody, because he's unconscious in a trunk
Right.
when we really meet him.
Will the real Moody please stand up?
Oh, man.
I'm dropping them all tonight, Dan.
You go from a Blues Brothers reference to an Eminem reference right out the gate.
One right after another.
Nice. Who's she going to drop next? Kesha? Who knows? Moody is a real vibe. I'm sure he would have loved that Eminem comparison.
Oh, yeah.
You get a whole... I will say this about Moody's reintroduction here. we get a full book of Barty Crouch Jr. pretending to be Moody. And we get that sense of paranoia from him that, Anna and I raved so much about. Like, oh, he really got the sense of Moody. Which is true, because we see paranoia from Moody in this chapter.
Very paranoid.
But did you get the sense that it was written a little bit differently?
Oh, yes.
Because I picked that up. I noticed that for whatever reason, I could tell his paranoia here was different than the paranoia that Barty Crouch Jr., and obviously they're different people. I don't know how to explain this, but for whatever reason, it just came off as like, oh, this is a different, like, this seems like a whole different character.
It was. It definitely feels like there's a distinguishable difference.
And I just don't know if that's like my head knowing like, oh, this is the real Moody, so it sounds more like the real Moody.
Yeah.
Or if it's just literally her writing and being able to essentially say the same paranoid stuff, quote unquote, but in just slightly different way, so it comes off as different. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm just reading that, or let me know on, Twitter or Instagram, or comment on it if you picked up on the same differences in tone that separated the two Moody's paranoia.
Yeah. Well, I think it can also be seen, like, he says, like, the whole thing about the wand in his back pocket of his jeans.
Mm-hmm.
Don't put your wand there, boy. Like, just the use of boy, like, it sounds more like old man, grumpy, paranoid vibe.
Maybe it is that. Maybe it's like that aged paranoia instead of just like a generalized paranoia. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know how to describe it.
Yeah.
With this group of witches and wizards that come to pick up Harry, there's an interesting dynamic amongst them. Mm-hmm. And you can kind of gleam a little bit of some of their personalities a little bit. Particularly, there's two interactions that really stick out. There's obviously Lupin and Harry, who those two do have a history. They actually spent a whole book together in Harry's third year in The Prisoner of Azkaban. So they have a connection. They have a rapport of going back and forth, where Lupin can almost feel what Harry's thinking or what he must be experiencing right now, with all of this being overwhelming. And then you have Moody and Tonks. And Tonks is one of the new characters that we get a lot of in this chapter. And I love the interactions between Tonks and Moody and Tonks and Harry. And I think you get some interesting interactions. And yes, wand safety and butts is a big... is a big conversation point.
I wonder if the real Alistair Moody cares about the thickness of cauldrons.
Thick bottom cauldrons?
If he thinks that a thick bottom cauldron is much better than a thin bottom cauldron.
Do you think Percy would take him seriously enough, even if they had this similar thought process? Like, Percy, I think, if I remember correctly, he was a little on Moody in Goblet of Fire. He's like, oh, this old bat is like losing it a bit.
Yeah.
But do you think if Moody was like, no, thick bottom cauldrons are the way to go, Percy would be like, now we're talking. Now
we're on the same page.
Yeah, maybe.
I think so.
You think he's really reading like ministry reports on cauldron thickness? Maybe. I don't know.
I feel like that would be a Moody thing. I bet you he's reading that, article. That...
You think he was the one that penned in about, like, the thin bottom cauldrons being a liability?
I think he probably was.
Maybe. No one's paying attention to basic wand safety anymore. Well, maybe no one was paying attention to cauldron safety anymore, and he wrote into the ministry.
Yeah. And
gave Percy all that work.
I mean, it's a legit concern.
I think we've discovered a new canon.
Yep.
Yep. That'll be Molly's fan fiction. Moody's random letters to the ministry.
Oh my god. I love it. I want it to happen. Dan, there's so many weird things I just want to happen.
This is why you come to listen to the Molly episodes. These are random tangents. I love them.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, so the wand safety comes into play. He's like, I've seen, he goes something along the lines of, I've seen many a wizard have like a wand incident or whatever, putting their wand in the back pocket.
Yeah.
And then as they're getting ready to leave on their long journey, Tonks makes the kind of smart aleck comment about like, everybody got their butts? All right, let's go. Like, hold on to your butts. All right, we got this.
Well, even just like, who do you know who lost a buttock?
Yeah. And then Moody like halfway dodges that question, doesn't he?
Yeah.
That's great.
Never mind you.
It almost makes you wonder that he did it at some point and something went terribly wrong in his youth.
Yeah.
And he had to like take a trip to St. Mungo's or something like that.
If he's missing a buttock cheek.
I mean, he's got a chunk of his nose missing, so
He
you
does.
never know. You never know.
know.
Let's never talk about Moody's butt ever again.
You're welcome.
Yeah,
Again.
Things I never expected to discuss. Oh man. I do like
asking the real questions here, Dan.
You are. I do. Going back to Lupin and Harry for a second, I think their key interaction is when when Lupin is like leaving the letter for the Dursleys.
Yeah.
And they just have this very quick back and forth about the letter of just like, oh, you know, I'm going to leave this letter for the Dursleys so they're not worried. Harry, they're not going to be worried.
Yeah.
And then Lupin continues this train of thought, and Harry just interjects with like one-liner interjections. I just really like the back and forth. Why are the Dursleys not there? Because Tonks is very clever. And she did her, I don't know if she did her homework or she just like assumed all Muggles care about this or what. But it's the most Dursley thing possible. So she like hit on the absolute best. She sent them through the Muggle Post an invitation to the All England Best Kept Suburban Lawn competition, which is the most Dursley thing I think I've ever heard of in my entire life.
Oh, for sure.
And again, I don't know if Tonks did her homework on this, or this was maybe a Dumbledore-like suggestion of just like, pro tip. And just like slid her like some insider information.
Yeah.
Either way, I'll give Tonks the credit, but clever way of getting them out of the house for a night.
Absolutely. I want to give Tonks the credit for that. I do.
I just like the idea of her like, could you imagine if
like
Vernon
giggling.
Dursley met Nymphadora Tonks?
Oh, he'd
Like,
hate her.
Oh, I will post a picture, because you have the illustrated version, right, of this book. I will post the picture of Tonks to our Instagram. And just when you're looking at that picture on our Instagram, just think of Vernon Dursley interacting with this. Because she is like the antithesis of Vernon Dursley about every single way possible.
Oh, 100%.
We'll get to Tonks in a second. I do want to also mention, though, while we're still hanging out with the bunch of them, that Harry begins to say Voldemort's name. He doesn't even say it fully.
Mm-hmm.
And you just get a bunch of odd hissing noises throughout the group. These are presumably battle-hardened individuals that have come to guard Harry on a journey, and they're just like, no, like, time out, don't want to hear it, absolutely not.
Yep.
I think it goes back to just the level of fear and anxiety that went through some of these people through the first Wizarding War, and how bad that was. That, you know, these people are adults, they're presumably all competent and can handle themselves. And they're not even waiting for him to get the full name out before they're like, no, I don't want to hear it. And the only one that doesn't really recoil on it is Moody, but I'm presuming that only because he speaks immediately after this moment. He could have recoiled at it, I don't know. But he's the first one to speak, so I don't feel like he did.
I don't think Moody really recoils from anything.
Yeah.
Honestly.
It would be a little, honestly, if I'm thinking about it, it'd be a little weird for him too.
Yeah.
But I don't know, for whatever reason, and I honestly, not a spoiler, because I don't have much to bank this on, but Sturgis Podmore doesn't feel like a guy that that would like recoil, but I feel like he did here.
Yeah.
I don't know. Let's get back to Tonks.
Yes.
So Tonks and Harry end up going up to Harry's room to pack efficiently before they leave for their journey. And we find out a lot about Tonks here. We find out that she's a, I'm going to try to pronounce this as best as I can, a metamorph magus.
Mm-hmm.
And what they are is a very rare type of individual who can change their appearance at will, which is really, really cool.
Super cool.
They're born, not made. So it's an inherent trait that you're born with. You can't develop it like you can, let's say, animagus. Like an animagus, you can learn that skill and practice it and develop it and become one.
Well, also, too, there's a whole thing you have to follow with that. Like...
There's a process.
Yeah.
There's a very strict process.
Yeah.
But this is just about as random and rare as you can get. Which led to her getting top marks in concealment and disguise during her Auror training. So that goes back to the conversation that we had where it's like extra schooling, I guess.
Yeah.
After Hogwarts is like, that's fine that you finished your 7 years. Now that you're trying to do something big, extra, like figure that out. So top marks without much studying in concealment and disguise.
So concealment and disguise. All I could think of for that class is people just putting on those glasses with the big nose and like the little...
What are those called? Like the Groucho Marx glasses or something like that?
Yeah. Just like, and like a hat, like a fedora. Just being like, I'm disguised now.
And now all I'm thinking is like the Pink Panther theme of like...
Yes.
Dun,
Dun, dun. Yeah.
dun, 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 dun.
Yeah. And I bet you Moody was just like, this class is stupid.
I can see through all of this anyway.
Yeah.
This is dumb. Yeah. Now, where I see him doing well is where she did not do well.
Yes.
She nearly failed stealth and tracking because she is self-reportedly very clumsy.
Yes.
So much so that she broke a plate when she entered the house. She's only a year into being an Auror, so she's relatively fresh, relatively young. And obviously the rapport that she has with Moody suggests that they have a fairly decent relationship. So yeah, and we see a little bit of Tonks' magical skill. Obviously she turns her color, the color of her hair from more of a, what was it, like a violet purple to a violent pink.
Yeah.
And then we see some of her magic on display when she cleans out Hedwig's cage using the Scourgify spell. She also dumps a bunch of his stuff into the trunk for him. And then kind of says that she's not really good with these domestic type spells. Mm-hmm. She tries to fold his sock for him, and it does not go well. So not really her thing. But yeah, I mean that's kind of our intro to Tonks. So what do you kind of get from that little interaction between, well, the interactions between her and Moody and her and Harry?
I mean, I like Tonks. I think she seems like just a clever, stone cold weirdo that is super confident with herself to a degree. You know, she's willing to admit like where she has weaknesses. But yeah, I think the interaction between her and Harry is you know, obviously different than with her and Moody, because it seems like she can relate more to Harry, I think, in terms of age.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
You know?
That's a good point.
So she's a little bit, I mean, she's relaxed with Moody too, but it's a little bit more like, oh, hey, all right, let's just do this and get going. So
she seems like a decent combination of obviously competent and she knows what she's doing, but also more laid back, chill,
Yeah.
not too uptight
Right.
kind of person, which I think, like you said, relates more to Harry.
Yeah.
And he's able to kind of, he can't help himself but be interested. Like, I feel like like we just talked about, he has all of this angst. He has all of these questions, which he tries to fire at Lupin early. He has all this going on, and then he notices Tonks just change her hair color, and he just stops and is like, that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
You're kind of cool.
I think it's, in terms of this chapter, it's a good fresh breath of air for Harry. I think it's good to have Tonks with them because it's like, Lupin, he's like, he's older. He's going to be a little bit more serious about the situation. Moody is very serious about the situation. And then the other auras and that came with, they're a little bit, we don't really know them very well,
Can you imagine if Lupin and Tonks were not on this mission?
No.
Can you imagine how horribly this probably would have gone?
Yeah.
Like, it wouldn't have been Harry coming willingly. It would have been Moody kidnapping this child.
Right.
And, like, forcibly taking him.
Well, especially, too, because I'm sure that there's a part of Harry that's going to be a little distrustful of...
As he should be, probably.
The actual Moody because of previous situations.
Which would then make Moody like him more because he's like, you're cautious and paranoid. Just like me.
Yes.
Oh, man. I feel like, so Anna and I just got back from Orlando, and yeah, we did the Wizarding World, and we did Disney, and we had a bunch of fun. I feel like this journey that they go on from Privet Drive to Grimmauld Place, I feel like this could be a whole ride.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like this could be a theme park ride.
Oh, yeah.
And I know they just have...
cool.
Right?
Yeah.
And yeah, you could spice it up a little bit by having some Death Eaters come in and attack during it and get a little bit more, roller coastery.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be cool, though, to have, like... and I don't know how they do it. So we went on their newest ride, the Hagrid's motorbike ride. And that was, a fairly newer, unique ride that you're literally riding, like, Hagrid's motorbike. I think it'd be cool if they could figure out a way to get you as on a broom.
That would be awesome.
I don't know how they'd strap you in or lock you in.
Yeah.
But I think that'd be really cool to have like a broom setup ride and you're taking this journey and you can make it 40. You can get wind in your face.
Oh, that'd be so cool. Yeah.
They could spritz you if you go through a cloud like Tonks was saying, like, we're not going through the clouds, we'll get soaked.
Yeah.
They can maybe get the chill in the air as you go higher, blast the AC on you a little bit.
That'd be awesome.
And, as the, Death Eaters come in, firing spells at you, you can dip and, dot. I think it'd be a cool ride.
That would be cool.
I think they should just hire me as I know that Disney calls them Imagineers. I don't know what Universal calls them, but
yes.
Yeah. I will take that job.
I feel like, though, if they found a way to do the whole broom thing, they would probably do a Quidditch thing before they would do a ride to Grimmauld.
You're probably right.
But I think I would want to do the ride to Grimmauld more than the Quidditch thing.
I feel like you could mix it up a little bit. It would be more of a ride.
Yeah.
Whereas Quidditch would be an experience.
Yeah.
Which would be cool. But I don't know. I'm just thinking of Green Gots, Escape from Green Gots kind of ride, or the Hogwarts Castle ride.
Ooh.
Where it's you kind of get that experience of dipping into a world and you feel like you're dropping when you're really not dropping. Just on a broom. I just don't know how you would be locked into the broom and make that safe.
Right.
But I'm sure they could figure out a way.
Yeah.
But anyway, so there's my 2 cents on that. We get to our destination and we find out that Moody has the put outer, which is a cool little thing that he borrowed from Dumbledore. And you get this slip of paper that Harry has to read and memorize. The headquarters of the Order of the Phoenix may be found at number 12 Grimmauld Place, London. And then things will happen. But that's essentially the chapter. Anything else you want to kind of double back on, or?
I mean, just that whole ride over there is just fantastic with Moody and all of his like paranoid.
Let's double back.
Yeah.
No,
that's definitely not.
I do like their formation of having like Harry in the
Yeah.
center between Tonks and Moody, and then having the other wizards like rotate in a circle around, like to the right, left, above, and below him.
Yeah,
That's kind of a cool formation.
Yeah.
But then they also said that there was a secondary formation that if they got killed,
Yeah.
they would take over. Like, go to this point and there's a whole other troop that will take over.
Right.
But they don't mention who any of those people are.
Right.
Or how many of them are there. Because obviously someone's sending sparks up into the air to let this group know we're all good.
Yeah.
I want to know who the second group was.
I know.
I kind of want to know who that was.
Yeah.
Moody is very... They're all talking about getting killed, and then Kingsley just comes in with, no one is getting killed. Like, we're fine.
Yeah. Oh, Kingsley, Dan.
I know, we do get Kingsley as a character. I do love me some Kingsley.
Yeah.
I think he's a very cool character, and this is the first time he's mentioned in the series. They do mention a little bit of a pecking order, because, Moody is Moody, but Tonks mentions that Kingsley's also in Orr, and he's higher up than she is in like the pecking order. So there's like a ranked system for the Orrs. So that was like a little nod to how that hierarchy works and where they're all at as far as experience and things like that. But I just like the group talking about like, if we die, or if like,
Moody, if we die,
don't break ranks.
If we blow off our buttocks.
Right. Everybody, buttocks on? Great. Okay, let's go.
All right.
Oh, man. Anyway, we have some interesting things to talk about in the spoiler section, so we'll go ahead and get to the spoiler section. Molly has some interesting thoughts on some of her favorite characters. It's going to be an interesting one, because I haven't heard this. She only teased me about it in the prep, so I am very anxious to hear what she has to say, and we will be right back with it. All right, we are back with the spoiler section. We will not be talking about Moody's butt anymore, we promise. Unless Molly gets into another tangent, but who knows?
I cannot promise anything, Dan.
Fair enough. I just have a couple of small spoilers before we get to your little character switch up here, which I can't wait. So, a couple of spoiler things that I want to get to. Is it a little weird that Harry doesn't recognize the voice in the Howler?
It is.
Is it a testament to Albus Dumbledore that he can't recognize Dumbledore when he gives like this menacing, aggressive howler? Or do you think it's like the howler itself is like changing the voice enough?
No, I think it's that you never see upset and angry and yelling.
Mm-hmm.
That was my biggest thing. Like, okay, odd choice for Dumbledore to be all angry.
An aggressive howler?
Yeah. He woke up and he chose violence.
He was like, how can I get to the point this across?
Yeah.
Dominating. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's just that. I feel like, and granted, there was a lot going on, and Harry had a lot going on, so maybe he's not, like, clicking on all cylinders at that point, that he can't really recognize the change in tone that he's used to. But still, I think it's a little odd that he couldn't recognize a voice that he should be pretty familiar with.
Yeah.
The other thing is, so I wanted to get this opinion from you. This scene mimics a scene that we get in Book 7 in the Deathly Hallows, with Moody leading a group to lead Harry from Privet Drive.
Yep.
And that's obviously the very famous, very well-loved Seven Potters scene. And that group is very, very different from this group, with the different numbers of witches and wizards. Obviously, in that group, there's no Dodge, no Diggle, no Vance, no Podmore, no Jones. It's just Moody, Lupin, Tonks, and Kingsley, really, that double up and do both of those scenes. So I'm wondering if the others, at that point in Book 7, have either been, honestly, killed, or they're just on other missions, or, like, why the substitutions in members?
Maybe it's because the members you have in Book 7, there's a lot more writing on the line, and they actually care, about Harry. Like, they're very close to Harry, so maybe they're going to be more willing to protect and more willing to pose as Harry.
If you replace Mundungus Fletcher in the Seven Potters with Sturgis Podmore,
that is an odd choice.
Does Moody, survive? Because he's actually got someone competent that will actually, stay?
Yeah.
Instead of, Bolt last second. Granted, it was Voldy coming after Moody, not just your average Death Eater.
Right.
So Sturgis Podmore could have died then, too, if you switch. But, really? You can find a better guy than Mundungus Fletcher?
Mundungus.
I feel like... I feel like you have better options to maintain constant vigilance than Mundungus Fletcher. But anyway,
Mundungus.
I was just wondering, why that change. Obviously, you want to get more Weasleys in, and that obviously creates a more perilous situation because you don't want any of these people to die because you've set such a connection with all of them. And obviously, we do have some losses coming out of that, but I was just wondering, it's a parallel scene,
right?
It's the same thing. It's just why are some different and why,
No,
why?
It's a very good. I've never thought of that, so it's a really good thing to bring up.
All right, let's get to the main event.
Oh boy!
So Molly, when we were doing this prep, you mentioned something to me.
Yeah.
That your thoughts on a character. Or characters, plural, might have shifted. The winds might have shifted in a certain way.
Yeah.
And this is a big deal for you.
It's a big deal.
Explain.
Okay. So, we always talk about who our favorite character is outside of the trio. I've always been a big Molly Weasley fan. I think we all know how obsessed I am with the Weasleys, with the Burrow, with their family, the whole thing.
Yep.
And it's not too big of a jump here, but I think the winds have changed a little, because every time I reread these books, you get a different perspective, you pick up something new, you find something new you like. I think I have to change my favorite character outside of the trio.
Ooh.
I know.
This is big because you've been very heavy on this.
And don't get me wrong, I would say Molly Weasley is still very close. It's a little notch above. But I think I'm going to have to change it out with Arthur.
Arthur! You're switching Weasleys.
I'm switching Weasleys. I'm switching parent Weasleys.
All right, so what's the logic behind this? Why the switch?
It's funny because after reading Goblet of Fire again with everybody and just the whole nonsense of Molly Weasley and the whole Rita Skeeter thing, it just rubbed me the wrong way. And I was just like, I love Molly Weasley. She's an excellent mother. And I know it's a really weird, petty thing I'm almost being petty myself.
You're being petty about the pettiness?
I know! But I just was I don't know. I don't know if I can have that gold medal for Molly Weasley now. And of course, my second choice is going to be Arthur.
So, Molly gets a lot of the shine because she's in the books far more prominently than Arthur.
Right.
I feel like. I guess, because Arthur's in the books a lot. I think Molly's moments in the books get more shine because she's
so fiery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Her moments in the books are a little bit more in your face.
Yeah.
And get a little bit more play because Arthur's such a more chill
Yeah.
individual.
Yeah.
So his parts aren't played up as much, maybe.
Yeah.
Molly, I think, does have some flaws. And I think the point that you brought up with the Rita Skeeter belief, but not even just that. You saw her fall hook, line, and sinker for Lockhart, too.
You're right.
And clearly she has a weak spot.
Yes.
She definitely has a weak spot for, I don't want to say propaganda. Skeeter's propaganda. Lockhart's just...
celebrity.
She's a sucker for that kind of stuff.
Right. The tabloids.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And I think it's one thing to be a sucker for that kind of stuff. I could excuse a lot of that.
Yeah.
But to your point, when it hit so close to home with Hermione, and I get that she hasn't had a lot of honest, close, interpersonal interaction with Hermione at this point. But, I mean, clearly your son and your, for lack of a better phrase, adopted son, because that's what she really thinks of Harry.
Right.
If they're such good friends with Hermione, do you distrust both of them to be, like, not a good judge of character?
For sure.
Like, that kind of confuses me a little bit. Like, you're throwing away your son and adopted son's opinions kind of out the window for this random writer that you don't actually know.
Exactly.
It's a little concerning.
Yeah. I mean, again, Molly is a great mother, and, you know, I'll always have a very, very special place in my heart for Molly Weasley. Not totally being like, she's the worst.
Here we go. Let's do this. Instead of talking some negatives about Molly, which we've already done, but whatever. Let's talk some positives about Arthur.
Yeah.
And why Arthur gets that bolted position now.
Yeah, so Arthur is just that chill dad. And he's just a great guy, and he's hilarious. And I always think back to the scene, back to the Burrow. And when, you know, the boys are getting yelled at for taking the flying car. And he's like, that was very bad, but really, how did it go? And it just brings such a good, special place in my heart with Arthur. Like, he's just that fun-loving dad, and I love the family atmosphere of the Weasleys. And
I think my personal favorite Arthur moment so far in the books was at the Quidditch World Cup.
Yeah.
And he's trying to give them, like, girl advice because of the Velas and the whole bit.
Yeah.
And it was really good father advice.
Yeah.
And that they kind of ignore because it's a dad giving that advice. But I'm like, oh, that's a nice moment for Arthur. Yeah. And I think if you question Arthur's prominence in the books because he might not be, you know, the most forefront or in-your-face character, look at the way his family looks at him. Mm-hmm. Like, he's had an impact on particularly his sons. I mean, there's the obvious connection with Percy because they're both in the ministry. I get Percy has his ups and downs with Arthur. Mm-hmm. But I think that influence is there whenever your son kind of goes into your line of business. That's a direct thing.
Yeah.
Obviously, I think the twins have the closest. Of any of them, I think the twins have that bond with Arthur the most. And they recognize, I think, Arthur's genius more than maybe anybody else because they see his love of Muggle artifacts as a potential workaround almost of like, no one values this skill or technique. We can maybe do something with that.
Right.
And it's cool that he sees value in it and we see value in it and we can kind of like come together on that.
Right.
And, you know, I think they sell a lot of Muggle magic tricks at their future shop. I don't know. There's just something about Arthur Weasley that's just like, here, this is the best thing I could say about Arthur. He gives off that vibe of that you desperately want in a parent where whatever's happened, whatever's going on, no matter how bad it is, come talk to me about it.
Yes.
Because I won't judge you. I'm not going to yell at you. we're going to figure out what the problem is and we're going to fix it.
Right.
And I think you see that most with Harry, of all people.
Yeah.
Who, whenever he has a real issue, and I get Sirius is not long for the series at this point.
Yeah.
So there's that. And Harry's relationship with Lupin gets strained when he tries to come to Lupin for that. But his relationship with Arthur's never strained. And Arthur always takes Harry seriously and never questions him. Never goes like, oh, you're wrong, or that's stupid, or that's not worth looking into. He always treats him
like an adult.
But like an adult.
Right. He's never gonna chastise you as like a child, like a full child.
Right.
Like you were saying, he's gonna sit down. Not only that too, like Arthur is just like such an encouraging person and so full of life, and he reminds me in a way of like an Atticus Finch type character. Almost like he wants to see the good in people. I mean, he's gonna lay down the law when he needs to. Like, he's a smart man,
right? And
he's a talented wizard, you know. But yeah, he's just a good-hearted person, like down to the bones.
I think people should really pay attention to Arthur more. Literally you really should do it starting in book 3, even, with, you see like him and Molly have an argument over how to like treat Harry.
It's like a quiet strength that he has.
Yes.
You know?
And like even in book 3 when they argue about how to treat Harry and what to tell him and what not to tell him. I mean, that's a difference between who Molly Weasley is and who Arthur Weasley is. But then in book 4, you get more of him at the Quidditch World Cup and how he deals with the kids and how he does all of that. And now, in book 5, you start getting more of that real relationship. Who is Arthur Weasley really starts in book 5 because you get a lot more of them starting here.
Yeah. And
you get him as that confidant for Harry. And I guess the sense of, and you get that with all of his kids too, is just that willingness to be like, hey Dad, let's talk.
Right.
Like, hey, I need to talk to you about this. What's your advice on this? Whether it's something silly or whether it's something very serious, you get that sense that all of them have that, like, we can always talk to Dad.
Yeah.
About whatever.
Yeah.
Not that they can't with Molly, but they do have to watch their words. And
right.
You can see all of the kids
watch
their words around Molly when they don't hold anything back when they talk to Arthur. They like let it fly. And he always deals with it well.
Right.
Which I think is a mark of a really good parent. But
absolutely.
And we will have more
more
Arthur,
conversations.
I love Arthur. Yeah. I love Arthur a lot.
Yeah.
And I think Anna and I had a really good conversation about fatherhood with Sirius. And like how Sirius is kind of like trying to fit that needle between like Godfather and father surrogate.
Right.
And doesn't know exactly where that line is, nor should he, because that's a tricky needle to thread.
Yeah.
But we kind of had that conversation, which I thought was a really good one. And Arthur's not trying to be anybody but himself.
Yes.
Which is great. And I think as much as people give Molly the title of like mother of the series, Arthur, I think, deserves that. I mean, he is a father's father in the series.
He's a quiet force.
Yeah.
And he's a good human being.
Like, I feel like Molly tells the twins to do something. They'll be like, yeah, Mom, okay, and then go off and do it in their room. I feel like if Arthur tells them, like, boys,
it's a bad idea.
Really. Like, you really need to stop this.
Right.
Or at least think twice about it.
Yeah.
They might not listen to him, but they'll pause.
Right.
They will give real pause and be like, Dad's saying not to do this. Right. Maybe we should really consider it.
I feel like it's that contradiction. Like, you know, Molly Weasley is the anger, and then Arthur Weasley is the disappointment. You never, like, you can take being yelled at.
Right.
You know, but man, if you disappoint your parent, whew. So, and I feel like that's Arthur's way, you know, like you're gonna. I would assume.
Boys, you got to be better.
Right.
You got to be better.
And that hurts more than just the pure angry yelling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do think that Molly and Arthur's marriage specifically is a really great counterbalance to each other.
Very good pairing.
They work well together.
Yes.
Obviously, because they produce so many great kids.
Right.
You know, and you know, Percy you could dislike or like or whatever, but eventually he comes back around.
Right.
And realizes what that family dynamic means to him.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I know we get 7 books and we think, oh, Percy's a lost cause at some point. He's only like 18, 19.
Right.
He's got a long way to go.
Absolutely.
Like the fact that he comes back at the end, he's got a long way to go still.
Right. I think too, you know,
he's probably older. He's probably in his early 20s, but still.
Yeah. And I think too, though, you always go through that phase a little bit in life where it's like you question your parents to a degree where you're like, what do they know?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure too, there's also that part of I want to be different and I want to stake my own claim as an adult. I don't want to always be in the shadow of my parents or something.
Strive for better.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I think Arthur and Molly, well, especially Arthur, they're proud parents.
Yeah.
But I think they're also the type of parent, like most parents should be, of they want better for their kids than they had. They always want their kids to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
Percy goes about it in a little bit more of a irreverent way. Like, Bill is successful, but he never, like, tries to shove that in anyone's face. He's just like, I am what I am, and that's okay.
Right.
And you guys are you guys, and that's okay. Whereas Percy's like, no, I want to be this. And what you guys are isn't living up to that. And I think that's where it gets cross-wired. But
yeah.
Anyway.
But yeah. So to be clear, I'm also not changing my favorite character.
You hate Molly Weasley.
Based upon hate, right? And dislike. It's more of I've realized, I've kind of looked at that quietness of Arthur and come to admire his traits more so and who he is as a person.
Well, you know, you've talked about your dad on the podcast a couple of times. Do you ever like find yourself like comparing the two?
That's a big part of it too.
Yeah.
You know, it's hard because it's just one of those things. Every time I look at Arthur Weasley and just some of the things he does, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's my dad. Yeah. So there's definitely a big part of that too.
I'm finding myself more and more often like when so again, Anne and I were just in Disney in Orlando. Plenty of dads. Yeah. And bless all of the parents that take their very small children. They're better than me. Yeah. like just putting up with all of that. They're better than me. Yeah. Every time we saw a dad being like an MVP, like carrying like trays of food back to the family, or like kid in each arm carrying them through the days, or like passed out or whatever have you. I would always think back to Arthur. I'm like, oh, that's such an Arthur move for this. Like, I'm now correlating Arthur Weasley with like good dads.
Oh, absolutely. He's a great dad. So
one more thing, because it's you, so I want to get your thoughts on this too. Yeah. Tonks. We get Nymphadora Tonks. Yeah. We don't learn it here in this chapter, but we know that she's a Hufflepuff. Yes. I think most would, equate her to being the best representation of a Hufflepuff. Yeah. In this series, in this 7 books. Series, yeah. I, again, still contend that she's in it more than Cedric Diggory, but that's beside the point. She is a wonderful representation of Hufflepuff.
She is.
What are your this is a spoiler section. What are your larger thoughts on Tonks?
Oh, I love Tonks. Again, I love any stone cold weirdo that the Harry Potter universe spits out. Yeah, I love Tonks. I love I will say Half-Blood Prince, she gets a little weepy, which we know why. We end up figuring out why, but that was a little...
Her mousy brown hair.
It was a little hard to watch. But then again, too, when I go to reread Half-Blood Prince, maybe my thoughts will change.
Once you, I feel like when we get into the weeds of the details on characters, and we could put ourselves in Tonks and Lupin. Again, spoiler alert, they're ending up together. And we can really get into the dynamics of that relationship. Because, we were, again, Anna and I were talking about parentage. And, you could point at Lupin and Tonks of making some questionable decisions. That, set a certain path for their child going forward, which we can get into more in Deathly Hallows. But Tonks is a unique, fiery character, but fiery in a different sense than Molly. She just doesn't take anything from anybody.
I like Tonks a lot.
Obviously extraordinarily talented, quick-witted.
Clever.
Yeah, just a cool...
And she can change her hair color whenever she wants.
She relates so well to here's the thing. Here's why I think a lot of people really like Tonks is because honestly, she relates well to our trio. And again, most of these readers read the books through the eyes of one of the trio, whether it's Ron, mostly Hermione, or mostly Harry. So you're looking at Tonks through their eyes and they think she's cool. So we kind of get that in. I mean, not to say that they're wrong. But yeah, I think that's why most people just love her, is because we see nothing but positive vibes through the eyes of Harry and Hermione.
Exactly.
Particularly.
But
do you have any general thoughts on Order of the Phoenix as a whole? Or some wrap up from Goblet of Fire? Because this is the first time you've been on in a minute.
I thought Goblet of Fire is pretty cool. Pretty cool ending.
Pretty cool.
Cool. And then you get Order of the Phoenix. Starts off with bang. Just another wild ride. I'm excited to see what opinions of mine change through rereading it and listening to your guys' thoughts.
I always have that surprise character that I was like, I didn't expect to love this character so much. And in the last book, it was obviously Barty Crouch Jr. I'm like, do I love this character? Why do I love this character?
Because he's genius and he's complicated.
And I'm wondering what character will take that role in book 5. As we read this on a more in-depth level than we've ever done before.
Absolutely.
Is there anything that you're particularly looking forward to? I know everybody loves the Department of Mysteries.
How can you not? Oh, man.
Or is there anything that you are not looking forward to that you're...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. Department of Mysteries again.
Oh, well, yeah, given our conversation that we just had.
Every time I get to that chapter, I'm just like, I avoid reading it for a while because I know what's going to happen.
Do you remember us talking about, if Harry ends up getting addicted to that sleeping potion that
Yes.
Ooh, that could have turned out really bad for Arthur Weasley. And really good for Sirius. Let us know your thoughts on Arthur Weasley, Molly Weasley, the Advanced Guard, the whole group. Your thoughts on Tonks, or Kingsley, which we didn't really even talk that much about, but don't you worry, I will talk about Kingsley in the future. Let us know what you think about all these new characters that we learned. Do you have a favorite? Let us know. Maybe that'll be the poll for this one.
Ooh. I like it.
We'll figure out a poll. That poll you can find on Spotify. If you're listening to this on Spotify, there will be a poll option when you look it up. And wherever you're listening to this, there's also a link to support this podcast. And you can set up a donation, which really helps us out. Because this is a lot of work and a lot of time that goes into this.
And Dan does a fabulous job.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. It's a lot, but we're happy to do it. We're happy to keep growing. It's more successful than I ever thought this would be when we started it up. So we thank all of our listeners for supporting this podcast, either by making a donation or by just listening. And that helps us out. But please share the podcast, give us a review. All of that helps grow the podcast too, which really helps. So with that, I think we'll end it here. Yeah. So for Molly, I'm Dan. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Hogwarts, a podcast. If you like what you've heard, please click the subscribe button on your preferred podcasting app and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Hogwarts a Pod.